NFL Network's draft analyst Daniel Jeremiyah has released his first mock draft of the 2026 NFL draft season. And today I'm going to be breaking down and reacting to all 32 picks in his first round. So before we get into the content today, make sure you guys click that follow button on X if you guys want more NFL draft content from me, Jack Sperry, on that platform. We're going to be putting out a bunch of scouting reports and film analysis out on there during the course of the draft season, mock drafts, big boards, positional rankings, stuff like that. So if you guys want more stuff from me, you can follow me at Jack_Sperry. And now let's get into the mock draft from Jeremiyah. And, of course, Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback out of Indiana, last year's Heisman Trophy winner, is going at number 1 to Las Vegas Raiders. Maybe it's a little bit of a hot take, but personally I think the Raiders should try and trade down. I think Mendoza is a legitimate round 1 prospect, but I don't think he's a slam dunk number 1 pick type of guy where you're going to say no to multiple firsts, multiple seconds, and the King's ransom that you could get by potentially trading down. That's a Raiders team that has a long way to go before they're ready to win, and I'm not sure if the position Mendoza is going to be being placed in there in Las Vegas is going to be conducive to early career success. Mendoza is a great kid. I'm sure he'll figure it out eventually, but I'm not exactly expecting Mendoza to light up the world in year 1 there with a bad O-line. Not the best run game, a defense that's probably going to lose Max Crosby and has no other high-end talent. Mendoza certainly is going to have quite a bit to overcome in the early years of his career. That is, if the Raiders stay put and take him. But it does seem pretty apparent at this point that the Raiders need a franchise quarterback of the future to drive ticket sales, jersey sales, all that different stuff. And there's nothing that drives revenue like drafting a new franchise quarterback, number 1. So I do assume he will be the number 1 overall pick. But then at number 2, Jeremiyah has Arvell Reese, the edge rusher out of Ohio State, going to the Jets. And Reese is a super, super dynamic defensive talent. Some people believe that he could be the second coming of Micah Parsons, where you move him around the formation. You can use him as off-ball linebacker, where he played a lot at Ohio State. You can use him at edge, like Micah Parsons has been used predominantly over the last several years. Just a freak athlete that you just don't see very often at any position, and I could certainly see Reese being the pick at number 2 to the Jets. Then we get to Spencer Fano, the offensive tackle from Utah. A little bit of a surprise pick here because usually, people have the kid out of Miami as the number 1 offensive tackle in the class. But, obviously Utah is known for their tackles. They got 2 guys that could go in the first round this year, and Fano's one of those guys. And honestly, if there's a team that could trade up to number 1 if the Raiders want to move down, honestly, Arizona might be one of those teams. They need a quarterback, and I think they got maybe a little bit of a better foundation in place to take on a quarterback like Fernando Mendoza, but certainly they could use another tackle. This pick would be fine as far as I'm concerned, but maybe they would trade down. I think you could probably trade down and get Fano later, maybe further down in the top 10. But then here we go. We got Francis Mauigoa, the other tackle here from Miami. And, I think that he probably does end up being the first tackle taken. He's really, really good. He's gone up against NFL caliber edge rushers in practice for multiple years, and Rueben Bain, and then, of course, Mesidor. So he's gone up against NFL caliber guys pretty consistently. He knows how to defend against them. And obviously his experience in college speaks for itself. I think he's going to be a top 10 pick. Then we get to Mansoor Delane, the cornerback out of LSU. Now, most people have Delane as a first-round prospect, but not top 5. But he's a good player, man. He's very fundamentally sound, really good and sticky in coverage. And, he might not be the most physically impressive, like, oh my gosh, this guy's just an absolute freak type of guy. But, he is very fundamentally sound. I think he'll be a good player in the league. But number 5 might be a little bit rich, at least for me, when it comes to Mansoor Delane. Then we get to David Bailey, my number 1 edge rusher in the class, depending on what position you think Arvell Reese is. But Bailey is an amazing pure pass rusher. He's a little bit undersized, so if you play him in a 4-2 or a 4-3 style defense where he's asked to set the edge and, do that kind of stuff as a run defender, might struggle a little bit. But if he's like an outside linebacker in a 3-4, you give him some help there on the edges, he's somebody that can just get after quarterbacks, man. He's just an absolute beast. No problem with the Browns taking him here, pairing him up with Myles Garrett. That is a scary duo along either edge. edge. And then, their top 5 pick last year, Mason Graham, is also on the interior. Then we get to number 7. We get Sonny Styles, the linebacker from Ohio State, physical freak of nature. And Washington is certainly a team that could use some more linebacker help. Bobby Wagner is going to be leaving the organization this offseason. Frankie Louvu is definitely in a kind of a weird spot right now. Didn't have a great season in 2025. And then Jordan McGee, their second-year player this year out of Temple. He's going into his 3rd year. Another guy that's a really great athlete, but still has a lot to prove. But Sonny Styles, man, he just flies all over the place. Big-time playmaker. Certainly Washington could use some more playmakers in the middle of their defense. Then we get to Jeremiyah Love at number 8, going to the New Orleans Saints, pairing up with Tyler Shuck in the Big Easy. And I like this. I like this quite a bit. I think Jeremiyah Love is a good player. I think they got a pretty decent offensive line. And for me, guys, like, I don't want you drafting a running back in round 1 unless you've got the infrastructure in place to give that young running back a chance to succeed right away, because, running back, lifespans in terms of their athletic primes are short because they take a lot of punishment. So you got to make sure that if you're drafting one early on, that they're going to be a success right away. With Calvin Banks and all the guys that they've got there in New Orleans, I think that would be a great help to their offense and a great help to Tyler Shuck as he continues to develop into hopefully their next franchise quarterback. Then Rueben Bain Jr. going to the Kansas City Chiefs at number 9. And of course, Rueben is one of those guys from the Miami Hurricanes, and he's got an amazing motor. He just keeps going, and I think he'd be a good fit for Kansas City. Scheme-wise, he reminds me a little bit, honestly, of George Karlaftis, and just in terms of their motor. He's definitely their type in terms of that 4-3, defensive end type that can set the edge. He's a good run defender. His arms are a bit short, and that's going to be the main thing that's talked about him. But his motor is relentless, man. I compare him to Brandon Graham from the Philadelphia Eagles. Is that worth a top 10 pick? I guess you guys can answer that question for yourselves, but I think Rueben Bain Jr. is a damn good football player. Number 10, we got Jermod McCoy, cornerback out of Tennessee. And McCoy, just based on the pure film, especially looking back to 2024, where McCoy had an injury that kept him out for the entirety of the 2025 season. But in 2024, if he would have came out last year, his tape was as good as anybody in last year's class. Like, this guy has a chance to be a really special corner in this league, and God knows Cincinnati needs help at corner and just on defense in general. They just need to bring in the best possible defensive player that they can get, and McCoy at this point could be the highest upside player that they could take. Then at number 11, Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State, going to play in Miami. Really love Downs' football intelligence, his anticipation. We talk about anticipation when it comes to quarterback play, but it doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to linebacker play and safety play. These kind of zone defender type of roles in the middle of a defense where they got to read out these route concepts, know how a quarterback is trying to attack them, read the eyes of the quarterback, and then make a play on it. There's nobody better than that than Caleb Downs in this class, and he was a freshman starter, a true freshman starter for Nick Saban at Alabama, which never happened. So that just shows you the intelligence and just how good of a player Caleb Downs is. I think he's going to be a stud right away in this league. Then at number 12, we got Colton Hood, another cornerback from Tennessee, going to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this is usually higher than where I usually see Hood going in mock drafts, but I mean, Daniel Jeremiah, to his credit, does his own evaluations. He doesn't go based on what other people are saying and stuff like that. I'm sure some Cowboys fans might be like, why are we, drafting Colton Hood at number 12 when maybe we could get him, in round 2 based on, some of the discourse that's out there. But, this is certainly something here where he fits their type. And I think that it would be a pretty decent fit in terms of player and scheme that they run there in Dallas with Christian Parker slated to be their defensive coordinator there in the Big D. So who's the number 1 player in the NFL draft this year? Let me know your pick down there in the comments section. Who's the best player in this year's draft class? Give me your pick down there in the comments for today's pin question. Just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. While I tell you about our sponsor today, let me know who's at the top of your big board right now. Now let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And the big game in Santa Clara between the Seahawks and Patriots is almost here. And there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than with Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means it's your last chance to get into the football action before the season ends. So close the year out right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. With the new social feeds feature, you can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups from winners winners with a single click. Copy lineups you like or use them as inspiration for your own picks. And a new feature from Prize Picks that they now have is early payouts. If your player gets off to a hot start, you now have an option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. You guys can take a look at my Prize Picks lineup for the big game in Santa Clara this year. I'm taking the more on receiving yards for Cooper Rush, the less on receiving yards for JSN, and the less on rushing yards for Ramondre Stevenson. You guys can download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, then we get to number 13. We got Makai Lemon, the wide receiver out of USC. And I love Lemon's game, man. Like, he's a little bit undersized. You know, that's going to be the knock on him. But when you watch him play football, man, like, he is just so good at everything from route running to running after the catch to having a great catch radius and a great ability to make tough catches down the sideline and over the middle. He is a complete wide receiver and I believe a future number one receiver in this league. And, man, LA combining Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, and now Makai Lemon to that offense is going to be probably the most dangerous trio in the NFL this upcoming season if it happens, and it might be one of the most dangerous trios in NFL history. Then we get to Vega Ioane here, the offensive guard from Penn State. Absolute beast. It's actually a really good guard class, and this guy is the best that we've had maybe come out in the NFL draft in quite a while. Baltimore is in desperate need of guard help. This would be a good pick for them. Then we got Cashius Howell, the speedy edge rusher out of Texas A&M, going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Then we get the New York Jets again here at number 16, where they take Carnell Tate. Where this is kind of, going against the grain. I think Tate is seen as like a universal top 10 receiver and a top 10 draft pick by a lot of people. And, DJ doesn't even have him as the number one receiver. He doesn't even have him in the top 10. But, man, I'm sure the Jets would be jumping for joy, and whoever their quarterback's going to be, whether it's Kyler Murray or somebody else, Carnell Tate will be, a great running mate for Garrett Wilson for many years to come, as those two Ohio State Buckeyes can wreak havoc for the next several seasons. Then we get to Akheem Mesidor, who perfectly fits, the Detroit Lions kind of, mentality, kneecap biter through and through. And, he's not probably going to be a number one guy in the league, but he's very powerful. And he'd be a great complement to Aiden Hutchinson on the other side of that Lions defensive line. Number 18, we've got the safety out of Toledo, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the number 2 highest graded safety according to Pro Football Focus grading this year, and he is just an absolute rock star, man. We saw Quinyon Mitchell come out of Toledo a couple years ago, and it was an instant success. I think EMW here has a chance to, kind of make that similar kind of impact, especially in that Brian Flores-style defense with Harrison Smith leaving. He can replace him in that role pretty easily. Then at number 19, oh my goodness, we are pairing Jordyn Tyson out of Arizona State with Ted Aurora McMillan, two guys that move the way that people their size should not be able to move. Like, Tyson is super impressive in the 50-50 ball situations, obviously with his size and his athleticism, but like his fluid movement ability and what that allows in his route running package, it reminds me a lot of Justin Jefferson. Even though he's bigger than Justin, he's still got those oily hips. When I watch him on film, it reminds me a lot of JJ, but he also reminds me a bit of CeeDee Lamb. And those are two really good guys to be compared to, which is why I don't think Tyson makes it this far down the board. I know he's dealt with some hamstring issues, and that might concern some people, but on film, he's the number one receiver in this class, in my opinion. I'd be shocked if he makes it to number 19. Number 20, we got Keldrick Falk with the second first-round pick from the Cowboys. He's all right. He's a good run defender. He's got some great size. He can set the edge. I don't know if he's a special pass rusher, which I think if you're taking an edge in round 1, you probably want your guy to be a future number 1 edge or at least a really high-end number 2. This one kind of has Cowboys written all over it, I must admit. Especially with Jerry saying that we got to stop the run, all this different stuff that he's been saying since they traded Micah. And then at number 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers getting Aaron Rodgers, or, we think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, some help at wide receiver. Denzel Boston out of Washington, really smooth route runner, great size, great 50-50 ball winning ability. You could pair him up with DK Metcalf, and those two guys with the size, and then Boston's separation ability would be huge for that Steelers offense heading into 2026. Then at number 22, we got Lee Hunter, one of my favorite players in this entire class out of Texas Tech. 330-pound nose tackle type that wears the number 2. I mean, how could you not love Lee Hunter? He's been dominating at the Senior Bowl, and he's got Harbaugh defense written all over him for sure. Wouldn't mind this pick whatsoever. Then we get Avian Terrell, a cornerback out of Clemson, going to the Philadelphia Eagles. With Adoree Jackson and the way he played this year, they could certainly use a number 2 corner on the opposite side of Quinyon Mitchell. And of course, they've got Cooper DeJean in the slot as one of the best nickels in the game. Terrell's a really solid player that I think can fit in nicely there in Philly. Then we get to Caden Proctor, the offensive tackle out of Bama, going to the Cleveland Browns with their second first-round pick here of this mock draft. And, he's fine, certainly. You get a guy on the edge in David Bailey, and then you get a guy on the on the other trench in Caden Proctor. They do need some help on the offensive trenches, as the guys that they've had over the years that have been Pro Bowlers and all pros have gotten older, and that unit has deteriorated. Todd Monken, solidifying that group with Quinshon Judkins. We'll see if he's going to be able to go week 1, but that would certainly be a good first step in building this Cleveland Browns offensive line. Then we got Dylan Thieneman, the safety out of Oregon, going to the Chicago Bears. No problem with that pick. Then you get to the excellent, well-rounded linebacker out of Georgia, C.J. Allen, going to the Buffalo Bills. Kenyon Sadiq, the dynamic tight end threat out of Oregon, going to the San Francisco 49ers to pair up with George Kittle. I mean, the 12 personnel packages they can run with those two would be nuts. Monroe Freeling, the tackle from Georgia. This is a little bit higher than what I'm used to seeing for Monroe Freeling, but obviously DJ is a little bit higher on him, going to the Texans. And then you get Blake Miller, another tackle out of Clemson, going to the Los Angeles Rams. Peter Woods, the defensive tackle out of Clemson that did not have a particularly great season this year, but has relatively high upside with his physical traits, going to Denver. A good place to develop, if you ask me. Then you get Caleb Lomu, another offensive tackle, and this is the other tackle from Utah that I was talking about, going to the Pats. And then Brandon Siss, the cornerback out of South Carolina, rounding out Daniel Jeremiah's first mock draft of the 2026 draft season. And what's kind of interesting here about this mock, guys, is that Ty Simpson is not on this mock draft. Now, I think that there's definitely varying opinions on Ty Simpson because he didn't, finish his season out particularly great. But that middle third of the season where he was, beating Georgia and he was just killing teams and he was ripping the ball over the middle of the field. And I think that Simpson's going to be one of these guys that a McVay or Shanahan team that needs a quarterback is going to fall in love with, man. He can rip that ball over the middle of the field. He's got extensive experience this year under center, way more experience than, Mendoza or any of the more, technically more experienced guys have gotten under center. So in a weird way, I think he's gotten more like pro style reps than, maybe any of the other quarterbacks in this class. I think Simpson ends up going in round 1 to somebody. I think somebody falls in love with this kid, especially because when he was struggling, he had an inflamed stomach. He was dealing with some burris in his throwing elbow, and apparently he's got a back issue. Now, certainly the medicals is going to be something that determines how high Ty Simpson can go because if, he starts failing some of these physical, kind of evaluations towards the combine and at his pro day and all these different things, he might go a little bit lower. But in terms of the film, I mean, he's got more high-quality NFL caliber throws from under center than any other quarterback in this class. So I think at the end of the day, he goes round 1. But predict it for me down there in the comment section. How many QBs get drafted in round 1 this year? Is it just going to be one with Fernando Mendoza like DJ projects, or do you think there will be multiple, 2 or maybe even 3 if somebody else can sneak in there? Who do you think will get drafted in round 1 this year? Let me know what you guys think, and that'll be it for today's edition of the show. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today. Make sure you click that subscribe button for more NFL draft and just NFL general content here from us here at Chat Sports every single day.